Hello and welcome to the CAPE podcast. CAPE standing for the Child Abuse Prevention and Education Podcast. My name is Kristi McVie and I am an ex-West Australian police officer who spent 10 years with the police where I was trained as a specialist child interviewer and a child abuse detective. This podcast is all about sharing what I learnt, saw and knew whilst investigating child sexual abuse in the police force. It is also about sharing the knowledge that I gained in that time that helped me with my own parenting of my then 2-year-old daughter. My mission is to help share my knowledge and to help you in your role as parents to keep your kids safe, along with guest experts in the field of child abuse prevention and education, both in person and online. Thank you so much for joining in on the fight to prevent child sexual abuse. Your kids will thank you for it. Hello and welcome back to the CAPE podcast, the Child Abuse Prevention and Education podcast. I'm really excited to have I'm sure it's going to be a very interesting conversation today with Shannon Miller. Shannon and I haven't met in person as most of my guests because it's just such a big Australia and a big world that when we connect on similar topics and we find each other in LinkedIn and in Instagram, we just become advocates together. And so Shannon put his hand up to come onto the podcast today and talk about visibility of young people, children, child protection and family violence, and our, children's visibility in regards to that. And I'll let Shannon explain a bit more about that. But Shannon's from the Centre Against Violence in Victoria or in Australia, and has a very unique opinions and thoughts on a lot of things. And I think like I said to Shannon before I press record, I'm really excited to see where this conversation goes. So Shannon, thank you for being here. And I can't wait to hear what you have to say about all of this stuff. I think I'm going to get an education here. So so Shannon, do my listeners a favor and explain to them a bit about yourself and your history and stuff like that.
Yeah, sure. My name's Shannon. I work at Centre Against Violence. And I've been doing, I guess I've been doing this work for quite some time, about 12 years now. Yeah, my background started in alcohol and drug work and working with high-risk adolescents. And then sort of from there, I went into child protection for, almost a decade. And then, in that time, sort of developed my understanding of family violence. And then that's become, I guess, I'll say a vocation of addressing family violence and trying to put the message out there, what it is, who it's affecting, and to break down some of those misconceptions. So I try and do on as far as social media goes. And then in my professional role, I am disability and family violence practice leader in our area, and I work closely with the Orange Doors, Child Protection, other family violence services.
Yeah. And there's a big spotlight on family violence right now. Big spotlight.
Absolutely. The spotlight's dimmed a little bit over the last 2 months, but it's still there.
I don't think it's going to go away. When I was and I was just thinking about this before we jumped on the call, when I was a police officer and I was first being taught about family violence and, going out into the world and, obviously being a police officer who was dealing with family violence, it was the number one thing I was called out for as a first responder, the number one thing. And then second to that is I don't think we had enough training in family violence.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, certainly in my time in child protection, obviously I was, I'll say, very present in the Luke Batty case. Right. So I guess happy to pass on. I was actually part of the child protection team that investigated Luke Batty and worked with Rosie in that time. That's when I was starting my time in child protection. And past that, we had the Royal Commission of Family Violence. We had a huge push for family violence within child protection, and where we had specific family violence teams within child protection. And 4 weeks in, we just sort of sat back and were like, this is a complete waste of time. Every case is family violence. Like we couldn't narrow down families to go to that team because every single case was family violence. Every single case of, I guess, the maltreatment, abuse of children, it really had family violence as the underlying issue.
Yeah, and it is family violence is, it doesn't matter if it's a little bit or a lot. I don't know about you, Shannon, but I sit and contemplate a lot. I'm a very big thinker. My brain is very busy, and I contemplate what it takes to be a good parent, right? because I'm here to help parents become, protect their kids, but it also requires us to look inside ourselves and go, what is it that what is it that we need to do to be the best parent we can be? And, we get it right. Sometimes we get it wrong sometimes. And I definitely have in my own parenting journey. But one of the things that I have realized over the last, my daughter's 16 now, over the 16 years she's been around, is that you can't be a good parent unless you deal with your own shit. Unless you get real with yourself, take accountability, be responsible for what you're doing inside, what you're allowing, etc. And that's tough for some people to do. And so, when it comes to family violence, we all have a choice to make sure that we are as healed as possible. And that's just my little rant and tangent there, because we all have we all have it in us to do bad things to kids, bad things to other people, bad things to our partners, etc. We all have it in us, but we make a choice every day.
That's it. I mean, we're the children's biggest teachers, aren't we? And I guess, yeah, it sort of comes back to that, you can't tell an adolescent to spend too much time on your phone while you're scrolling through your LinkedIn profile. And the same goes for I guess, like addressing those gender roles and family violence with your children. Like we can't be telling, predominantly young boys, you need to do this, you need to do that, you need to do this, while we're doing the complete opposite. They role model what they see.
Yeah.
And a conversation I have all the time is, the media will crack on to the most serious cases of family violence, the
Of course.
femicides, the classic monster stories and all this, but they're not born in the lab. We've created these people in society through the way that we interact, what we teach them, what we teach boys that are important, what we idolize as being an ideal male and masculinity and all that.
Yeah.
And everything we're doing with them is a teaching point from the moment they're in this world to adolescence, they're adults.
Yeah. And I had that realization really early on when my daughter was about 3 weeks old. I had that realization. I don't know, it was late at night. I was feeding her in the middle of the night, and I had two realizations. One, I was never going to be alone again. And two, that, how do I help this little baby become a confident, good, human? Like, how do I help her get from, this baby to a really good, decent human that contributes to society and gives back to the community, and she's confident and strong and all of this, right? And I had that realization when she was 3 years old. So everything I've been doing since, and then obviously, I don't know if you know my story, but I became a police officer when she was 2, and etc. And so then that even became more paramount, because I saw what happened if we weren't present parents, B, didn't protect them, C, we allowed, what influences they have and who's around them, and what I did and my, what I'm sharing and showing to her, like you said, modeling. But yeah, it's just, parenting's not easy, but we need to think about it a lot more than we do. So with regards to your role and your experience, I mean, I would say you're an expert in this field. What is it that you're seeing? I mean, we're here to talk about, children's visibility, and before we started, I mentioned that I don't think there's enough. We don't give children enough credibility. We don't give them enough. We don't take them into account enough in a lot of this stuff. We don't think about them a lot of the time. So what's your thoughts? What's your experience, and what do you want people to know about that?
Yeah, sure. So, yeah, absolutely. The first number one for me is that every child and young person that, sees family violence, experiences it, has parents who experienced it, has parents who have perpetrated it, they know this. They're not blind to it. We've moved a long way in the last 10 years of, they weren't in the room, they're not affected. We're past that, which is good. But they are victims of family violence in every single incident. Whether it's, what they're seeing, what they're hearing, how they're seeing the relationship form between their parents. And we always see, and even in the family violence system, where, we have quite capable programs and professionals work in that space, we always see the children, and predominantly, we're talking about mum as the victim in most cases. We're seeing children just put under this umbrella with mum as the family violence client and not their own clients. And we don't, and there's not enough look into what exactly they're feeling, what they're going through. It's just sort of lumped together as a package deal where they are their own victim. And we'll have
True.
people who work in family violence who might be listening will say, would have used the term, talking about, children are family violence victims in their own right. I mean, we say that almost daily in these services. But a lot of the other programs aren't operating that. Like even in schools, like schools might know, there's family violence going on home. They might know there's an IVO in place against
Mm,
dad. Dad can't come to the school, but we're not addressing, those experiences of children in depth.
mm,
And yeah, and that's number one. But also the other big thing that we see that's just not getting enough attention is that, is the learning that young children, young people are getting from these
mm.
family violence incidents. You know, not only are they getting traumatized, they're getting, all sorts of health issues, mental health issues from their experiences. They're learning what a relationship looks like. And
Yes.
if you've got a father who's, assaulted mum, sexually assaulted mum, dictates what mum can do, isolates her from her friends, they are learning that is what a relationship looks like. Um,
Yes.
and we see, and it is extremely common that we see young boys who are victims of family violence to develop into perpetrators because they've reinforced this is what men do in a relationship. This is their role. They take control. When their girlfriend, partner doesn't do what they're supposed to be doing, if they're texting someone they don't know, it's their job to know who that is, where they're
Yeah.
going, who they're seeing, and same for young girls. The young girls are learning. This is what being a partner is. He
Mm,
can yell at me. He can check my phone. He needs to know what I'm doing to keep me safe. Like keep you safe from who? From
yeah.
other men. Um, and that's probably the biggest problem we're seeing. And so it's always little, or I guess what's seen, I shouldn't say little, but what they're seeing is small behaviors that they're experiencing, that they're learning about relationships, develop into big, big problems. And then
Mm,
and when we've got young boys who, grow up to be tough, take control, that they're superior to women, that, they're more important, they have a bigger role in society. And when you combine that with their experiences of supporting to use violence, experience of violence, maybe exposure to criminal activity. This is where we're seeing these, high risk perpetrators come from a lot of the time.
mm,
We do have lots of perpetrators who, are taught, I guess, more around that coercive control,
yep.
power. So I guess, and in the media you might see it as, the middle class, the
Yep.
businessman, the manager that's, dominates the family's decision making, that sort of thing. And certainly, that's a different dynamic, but it's still reinforced by, beliefs and values that they've learnt as children through their own parents' relationships and through their own role models. And I guess the other big point I really think is important is, you know, obviously the media tracks onto, whatever's going to get the most clicks, the most papers sold. And we hear these stories about, Andrew Tate and
Mm,
Mark Singh and those people who were influencing young boys. And and what I see in young perpetrators and adult perpetrators is the by the time they've even know who Andrew Tate is, the damage is already done. They
mm,
they are already they already think that men are superior. They already think that that women are taking away men's roles or ruin their rights and all this nonsense that they're learning. And this is stuff they're learning from birth. And like your Tates and your Sings, they're reinforcing these values. They're giving them a role
yeah.
model to latch onto. But this is not it's not where they're learning these values. They're well and truly embedded in their minds around this is men's role, this is women's role before they even know who these people are. And I think, yeah, we often see, a lot of blame put on obviously that, these people are just awful and preying on young boys. But yeah, like their key target market is these people who already have those values instilled and people who have learnt the same sort of values in their life.
Yeah. And in all of that, I think when we're talking about, that role modeling and what they're seeing, young men, for want of a better phrase, they're struggling with their identity, right?
Yeah.
There is a very, and it doesn't matter if you're a young man, a young woman, but they're struggling with their identity. Therefore, all of a sudden they've got behind that, you've got what they've seen in their parents' relationship or in their family relationship, and then you've got these influencers who all of a sudden seem like these messiahs, or these like people to look up to, and because they're struggling with who they are, what it means to be a man, what it means to be male. These people are, like you said, preying on them. And I think, though, as adults and parents who are listening to this, it's our responsibility to counteract the noise that is in social media, in the world. We need to have a bigger influence on our children before they get to the point where they can be influenced by people like Andrew Tate.
That's it.
That is really what it comes down to. Now, thinking about I have a few family members and men in my life that, they make the comment, well, I'm not like that. I'm not like all men. So I don't like how they keep putting it against all men. Like, it's not all men. And, I sit there and I go, well, it's not all men, but it can be any man. And,
Yep.
And a few of those family members get really upset. They're like, I'm sick of being lumped into this pile of men that, but yet I don't think a lot of people, even, and I'm not just saying men, I'm saying all people, understand the actual scale of what happens before you get to killing someone, right? It starts down the bottom with attitude and beliefs. So do you want to go through that with me? Because, like, just explaining how we get to murder.
Yeah, sure.
It doesn't go from I hate you, murder.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I guess we talk about, we talk about the values and beliefs, and a really good one is looking at the gender drivers of violence. Listeners can look that up on Our Watch. So we've got condoning of violence as a whole, and particularly against women. We've got men's rigid gendered.
Yeah.
Yep. You got men's control of decision making, and I always forget the last one.
I can't remember either, but like, even just the thought that they think that women should be, men are the, they're the money makers, they're the providers, and women need to look after the house, and women need to be the child rearers, and women, like, even like, just if for anyone, and for anyone who has young kids, just having a look and pulling apart your unwritten beliefs, the ones that we don't even talk about very often, they're there underneath it all.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we've got all those drivers and there's lots of what we see as everyday things that really feed into those drivers. And that's the conversation I have a lot with parents, particularly fathers and mothers as well, is, we can't be saying, trying to address violence against women, trying to address the gender roles, trying to teach them that, aggression is not the key. That's not the way. But then dads go take their sons to go watch MMA on the TV. Like, we can't have every single interaction with a young boy be about promoting violence, but then say, oh, yeah, but we can't have you doing that. Yeah. I mean, and it's everywhere. It's TV. It's and my son's only young. We're big gamers in our house, and we go on the PlayStation store, and every single game is violent.
Shooting game, violence game.
And and the only alternative, really, for the 90% of the games available, is it's either shooting, killing, superheroes beating up people, violent games, or sports games where the attitudes are not much better. And when you see live on TV, you see what's happening to crowds. We had Copa America in the Euros where huge spike in violence against women because a team lost, and then we've got Copa Americas where people were breaking in. Some families of players got beaten up at the game. I'm like, what is this? Like, this is what we're saying is positive places for young boys. But I digress a bit. So we've got those drivers of, controlling decision making. We've got, that men can take control, that they're superior to women, and that we promote violence. So we've got all those drivers that young boys are teaching. And then what we've got is, we've got complicating factors, which is where we take these drivers and then we add in, alcohol use, we add in, maybe drug addiction, childhood trauma, we've got financial stress, we've got unemployment, housing. And when we've got all these things, this is where it builds up into, really high level conflict in the home. We've got these mental health issues for men is driven by their insecurities, they're feeling that they're not a real man because of X, Y, Z, and then and then we've got things like women being supported to leave that relationship because they're not safe, which is absolutely what we want. And then that fear, that insecurity, that childhood trauma, that belief that men are in control, you're taking away my control. And that's when we're seeing a lot of these femicides. And that's why we talk to victims, we talk to professionals around, when a woman makes a decision to leave that relationship, that is the highest risk, because that is her cutting off that tie to him, and that's him losing control. And then we've got all these other issues building up, and sometimes it can be a struggle to explain this to people who don't understand how these things happen, because we talk about behaviors, is a decision, they're making a decision to use violence, and yes, that is absolutely right, but it's driven by all these values, all these complicating factors that are building up. And sort of, I guess the concept I've spoken about recently is what I call, I started a LinkedIn page, and it hasn't really taken off. I haven't even looked at it since I started it. And I call it the 1%. And I talk about, that murder is at 100%. And it's all these 1% things that are building up. It doesn't happen. We don't get someone who has no gender drivers, no complicating factors to murder someone. I've never seen it happen.
It's very rare.
Maybe someone does have an example, but
No,
I don't
it's very rare. Even in my experience of investigating or being part of teams who have investigated murders, there was two reasons. The two most common reasons was drugs and family violence. There's very little in between. There's very little reasons why people just all of a sudden decide to kill someone.
That's it. And the drug and alcohol is an interesting topic, and it's very polarizing across professionals, even professionals who have long educations and experiences, is because we sort of got this one cohort that's saying, alcohol and drugs is in every case, so we can't say that's not a cause of family violence. And then you've got the other camp saying, well, alcohol and drugs can't make someone who doesn't believe in violence against women, doesn't have those beliefs and values, to just get up and assault someone. It's not a magic substance that just makes you aggressive and want to kill someone. And it is an interesting topic. And there are a lot of academics at the moment who are having quite the battle, and in disproving each other.
It's interesting because I've seen men, especially, who, and women, but men who, and women. Now I'm thinking about it. There's been some women who, for instance, get on meth, especially. Not a lot of other drugs cause the complete flipping, the personality that meth does, where they haven't shown any signs of really violence or abuse or even sexual proclivities or any of that stuff until they get onto meth. And then all of a sudden meth is like they are a different human. So for me, meth is probably one of the most dangerous drugs that anyone can do. We know that anyway, but I've seen parents who were very good parents before that who have neglected and abused their children after being on meth. So for me, I'm not sure, maybe they had it deep down and it unlocks that part of them. I don't know, but I can see where the struggle is between academics, because
absolutely,
maybe it's down there and they've hidden it.
And that's what a lot of people do believe. That's these substances are and these like your financial stress and all that is certainly it's removing their ability to control the beliefs that they've long held, and that's what a lot of people are trying to address at the moment. But there's no question that if addressing, homelessness, financial distress, alcohol and drugs is absolutely going to reduce family violence and any physical for children.
100%. Even just healing some of your own childhood trauma will help you be a better person to everyone else.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think one of the things that really upsets me the most is how one of the things that upsets me the most is the family court system. I've seen family court do horrendous things to parents and to children. And it doesn't feel like the family court have children's best interests at heart, in my opinion. Like, from what I've seen and what I keep seeing and hearing, I don't feel like the family court has got it right at all. And children aren't being put at the front of any of this. And you made a comment, and I want to like put it on record. You made a comment that it's like, what was it? What was the comment?
I'll make the controversial comment. There was a few advocates for this going, and is definitely gaining traction, particularly in social media, and that is the reference that the family law court system is a form of child trafficking.
Whoa.
And
why is that?
that is a big comment to make. And the reason is, yeah, absolutely. And the reason is that outcomes in the family law court can be bought. And
It seems like that.
And these aren't people who are not educated. These are lawyers in the system. They're people who have been victims of the system, professionals who have given evidence. And what I guess a step it back a bit, family law court, the reason we have family law court is because parents generally separate and an agreement can't be made between them for different reasons around what happens with, property, with the children, custody. Now, I will say the biggest reason of that occurring is family violence. We've got people wanting to be in control, we've got victims ending that marriage, that partnership because of their experiences, and they want to get out, and that's their right. It's we have to accept that times have changed no longer, and there are absolutely male victims in the family court system, but predominantly we're talking about female victims. Men keep the finances in a lot of these cases. They have limited finances. They have to rely on legal aid because property money is tied up, and it's usually the father that controls that. There's disagreements over custody, and so then we've got the court system trying to make decisions on where children should be placed, what access, what arrangements, who's got who's got custody, who's the primary carer, all that sort. And then what happens is we then start bringing specialists. We start paying specialists to give evidence as to why someone's unfit, why someone shouldn't, why someone committed family violence. And what happens is the more you pay for these specialists, the better your outcome. And that's also with the legal system as well. The lawyers, if you're, say you've got a family, they've split up, it's been, let's say it's family violence, children have experienced violence from the father. Father goes and gets a 40 grand a year or whatever barrister. Mum goes to legal aid because she's got no finances because she's been a stay-at-home mum this whole time and dad's controlled the finances. You've got this high-priced lawyer against, maybe potentially a free legal aid. And I'm certainly not saying that lawyers who work with doing legal aid or anything like that are not superior. But you got this.
But they're very pressed for time.
Yeah, well, that too. And they're only funded for so much. You can run out of funding as well. And then, that's when we see mothers withdraw from the battle that is family law court, is because they can't afford it. They've run out of legal aid. They've got no money. Dad's got all the money. He's got this high-priced lawyer who's making up all sorts of nonsense in his favor. He's paying a 10 grand psychologist to provide a report saying mum's unfit and all this garbage. Or, maybe it's an assessment of the child. And you can absolutely buy that.
Shit.
Yeah,
it's what I'm hearing is it's just another form of abuse against the partner.
100%. And we see it used all the time. And, we see, and I do make this comment quite regularly is, because people who don't understand family violence, don't have the experience, don't know people who've been through it, will be like, oh, she's left him. It's all good. She's safe. She goes to refuge or whatever.
It continues.
And no, that is the start for a lot of women and families and children. The separation is just the start of the abuse. And then comes, financial abuse, systems abuse, using the police, the court systems, using custody, using professionals, using the schools. And we see it all the time. And yeah, and so we do have, there's quite a lot of really strong advocates, advocating for a revamp, for royal commission of the family law court system because it's broken. And I wouldn't disagree with that, because it really comes down to funding, and whoever's got best funding gets the best outcome. And that's why we're talking about child trafficking, because they're essentially we're giving children to the highest bidder, and that's why, that's how that term sort of come about.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know
Wow. And
there's
I have seen it in my comments on social media about child trafficking and family court. And I was like,
yeah.
what? And I was kind of like really confused because I hadn't heard that term before, but now that makes sense. And what I'm seeing, or when people are contacting me because they're desperate for help, is usually when the parent, so I'm trying to use non-gendered terms, but the abusing parent is sexually abusing the children, yet they've been threatened with loss of custody and loss of court, because if they make any further claims of child sexual abuse, and yet the child's going to them on a fortnightly basis or every other week and being sexually abused weekly or fortnightly and coming home after abuse, and the parent is basically hogtied. The non-offending parent is hogtied by that.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I do absolutely agree. I'm just going to add one other thing on there is then you've got child protection. Yeah, for people who don't know, family law courts override child protection, essentially. So family law court will suspend their proceedings if they've got ongoing proceedings for child protection to investigate or make a claim. But say your situation, you've got allegation of sexual abuse, so you call child protection do that assessments. If you're the non-offending protective parent, is what they'll say, that's the terms they'll use, they will close. They'll close their file because we've got a parent who's doing the right thing. We've got, in their involvement, they'll say, well, you can't let dad have contact. And that's fine. But then as soon as child protection close, that family law court order is back in place. And they actually, the second that child protection close in some of these cases, they actually have to return the child to the perpetrator, and there's nothing they can do about it until the family law court have made a decision.
The only thing that stands above a family law court order, and I think this is Australia-wide, is a violence restraining order or an AVO or something. That's the only thing that goes above a family court order, as long as the child is on that violence restraining order. So if you go and if personally you go get a violence restraining order because you're being threatened by your ex-partner or whatever, if your child isn't included on that, you still have to hand them over every fortnight or month or whenever they go to that parent. And that's the only thing that will, override a family court order. So just FYI, listeners.
Yeah, and the other issue there is they're vastly different in length. So, if you've got a final order with family court, it's until the child's 18, whereas you might have an interim IVO that's only valid for 3 months, or maybe gets granted for a year. In serious case, we do see, extensive IVOs, but they're not that common. And we're talking about huge risk.
Yeah,
and usually when,
because
and we're talking about cases where perpetrators are in custody for serious assaults and that sort of thing. So and that's what parents are dealing with. And I would say, at least, as a rough guess, I would say at least 50% of victims, whether male or female, in the family law court give up because of finances and because the battle is too hard to deal with. On average,
it's costing around $250,000 to fight a family court battle.
Yeah,
$250,000, and with the cost of living, the way things are going, if you've been a stay-at-home parent, if you don't have a job that can support you, all of those things, and then add in the complexity of, the child going into a unsafe situation with that other parents, like you said, parents are giving up because the other thing that popped into my head about all of this is that, like we know, and we're not diminishing violence against men, but it's a very small percentage. And someone pointed this out to me the other day. Men are less likely to be physically abused, but they're more likely to be psychologically and mentally abused, right? So the abuse that men have in violence is generally women, psychologically abusing them versus men physically abusing women. Is that your experience, or is that something else?
Yeah, so, somewhat. I wouldn't entirely say that's a theme that I see. I guess what's important, and I have written about this before, is women who perpetrate family violence. I've 12 years, maybe 10,000 clients I've been
Yeah.
my mind across. I've never ever seen a female perpetrator of violence not be listed as a victim. However, the caveat I'll give there is we do see, a lot of male perpetrators of family violence also being victims of family violence themselves, more often, I guess, as children as opposed to women
Okay.
who it's usually as a child and an adult before they are a perpetrator of violence. The example that I often give when I'm discussing this with others is, we had a local case, it was a homicide and then a second incident that was very close to being a homicide. The person survived, heavy in the media, huge mental health issues, it's a horrendous act of family violence from this female perpetrator. She was essentially jailed for, I think, 20 years out of this incident. And I was actually, I had a role with this case, and then I checked the police history of this case. And so this incident of family violence was I think the third or fourth incident where she was the perpetrator. And then before that, we had 78 incidents where she was the victim.
I
And this is,
gotcha.
the media's tracked onto this, this horrific, men are victims, all this. And the history for her
Was
abuse
massive.
was absolutely horrific. And they weren't, and, I guess I don't like labeling family violence incidents as, low level or high level, but these were really serious assaults, like
Yeah.
multiple hospitalizations, broken bones.
Right.
Her history of abuse was absolutely one of the worst I've ever seen. And these are the kind of incidents that are leading, I guess, female perpetrators
Yeah.
into that
I can
space.
see where you're going. I can see where
Mm,
you're going with that. It's
mm,
generally, it's not a just, oh, they just flip their lid, and
mm.
because I don't know. It's without gendering people, and without, generalizing people, for most part, women will be nurturers, and they will be
Mm.
trying to keep the family unit together, and they're trying to do everything they can to support everyone in the family most of the time. I will say this because, in my experience, I get, because I talk about child sexual abuse all the time, I get all of these people pop up in my comments going, but men never, women abuse kids too, and women do this too. And I'm like, yes, they do. But the probability of abuse is more likely to be a male, 97%.
Yep.
And it's probably similar, yes, women do abuse children, and yes,
Yep.
women do perpetrators of violence against men, but it's more likely to be a man.
Quickly interrupting this episode to let you know that Kristi has a whole library full of resources to support you. If this podcast hits home for you and you want to learn more about cyber safety, abuse awareness and prevention, and how you can protect your children, head to the link in the show notes where you can access free downloads, informative guides, and courses relating to these topics. You can also order Kristi's book, Operation KidSafe, A Detective's Guide to Child Abuse Prevention. If you want to join the fight against child sexual abuse, you can support Kristi to reach a wider audience by leaving a review on this podcast or sharing it with your community.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess I'll just, another comment I'll just add there is, when we talk about, women who abuse children, or, a big topic with the Amrose report on filicide has just come out around, obviously the stats have changed. It used to be, people believe that more children died in the care of a mother, and,
I saw that.
the new stats don't reflect that, which is amazing. But there's often this focus on, women's mental health, postnatal depression being the cause of filicide or harm to a child or neglect. But what gets missed in this space is the cause of those mental health issues is generally for a lot of the time is family violence against them. It's actually the experiences of violence and abuse that they've experienced that have resulted in their mental health and then results in a child being abused,
Yeah.
or neglected, or whatever harm has occurred, and that always gets missed. It's always this focus on women's mental health being the cause, and that's in particularly in child protection. But what we don't look at enough is what was the cause of that mental health condition in the first place.
And it wasn't until I had a friend go through, she had it's hard to explain someone else's health conditions, but she basically had they had no idea why she was having some neuropathy, and she was having like these, it seemed like she'd had a stroke. She was really young, etc. And then she had to have brain surgery to investigate what was going on and all of this stuff. She actually had a brain surgery. And then about 2 years after that, her and her husband split up, and she discloses that she's been a victim of violence for years and years and years, 10 plus years. And all of the violence caused the neuropathy and the stroke-like symptoms and the problems in her brain. And I think I saw a study about this the other day where they're saying like it actually causes changes in the brain, and what we're seeing and what we're trying to get, what I want to take this back to the original thought process is that 48% of kids are affected by domestic violence. Nearly 50% of children have witnessed or experienced domestic violence in the home. So if our children from 0 to 18 are experiencing domestic violence, we know that domestic violence creates brain chemistry changes. It contributes to mental health problems, contributes to their belief systems. It contributes to all of that. And then we expect them to be 18, being able to handle the world, being able to handle a relationship, and we haven't fixed that or helped them understand that or gotten them support or done all of the things that we can do to make it so that they understand that actually isn't how we're meant to be, interact with our partners and have relationships. Then no wonder we continue to this is a continuing cycle.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's what's going on, isn't it? Deep down. So I guess to get back to what we're talking about in regards to how do parents help support their kids and talk about this with their kids. It's hard. I'd imagine it's really hard as a person who's going through it to try and protect your kids from it as much as possible. And sometimes staying is easier. I know that it takes about 8 times. Is that about right? 8 times to try and leave?
I don't remember the last stat, but yeah.
It's about 8 to 10 or 8 to 12 times.
Yeah.
I know that a friend of another advocate that I'm friends with, she tried to leave 17 times before she was successful. So, for anyone listening out there, what kind of things would you suggest that they be talking with their kids about, healthy relationship support, talking to them about, these gendered roles? What kind of things can they use? What tools can they use?
Yeah, sure. I would say, some really good resources on the Raising Children website, and, looking at Our Watch. Our Watch have some amazing resources and some videos that really explain, where we see family violence operating from. But and obviously, we've got that crowd saying not all men become perpetrators, and that is true. But I guess understanding what behaviors are really likely to drive those people when they're older is understanding that. So really understanding, the encouragement of violence, the sport, we see a lot in sporting clubs, that this obsession with, power and control, domination of your opponents, of, aggression, and there's such a huge crossover between, young boys who are in sports, particularly aggressive ones, obviously, big in the footy clubs, of rugby, and football, I guess soccer, I call it football. And we do see a lot of these behaviors in those, in how they're taught to win, how to be somewhere, and those rigid roles from early ages. What we're teaching about, young boys' relation to young girls, and what we're teaching about, men's role in society, and what we're teaching about women's roles in society. We're seeing a lot more schools and primary schools really trying to address this, which is amazing. But it'll probably be a few years before we see the positive outcomes.
I just want to mention though, it's not necessarily, and yes, it's great that schools are covering this, because if they're not hearing it at home, at least they're hearing it somewhere. But it's really our job as parents to unpack and address this. Us as parents, it's our job to role model and talk to these things. I've been talking about healthy relationships with my daughter since she was 7, 8. Talking about what's, even you don't have to talk about sexual relationships or relationships with partner. What about relationships with their friendship group? When one friend is trying to control everyone else and tell them all what to do, that's an unhealthy that's an unhealthy relationship, or that might be an unhealthy behavior, and explaining that that type of control is not okay for people to do. You get to choose what and that's how I addressed it when she was little. And then we've talked about it when she got into, teenagehood, and she's in a relationship now. And we talk about it constantly because these are the stereotypes and gendered roles that we have, right? So I think it's really important that we as parents take the leading role and let the rest of society, like schools and stuff, help.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say my three things for parents, as a parent myself, is first is encouraging that relationship to build between boys and girls from as early as you can. I think we see huge barriers for young boys who are essentially raised until 12 to just have male friends, just be through their sporting clubs, and we see, I guess, a much better gender equality, understanding of women's rights, and that for young boys who have more female friends from a very young age. And that's something I really push with my own son from a young age. So we really tried to support him to have like an equal mix,
all kind of friends,
and all kind of friends, and I often gloat about my son, but like just the range, like we do, obviously given my role, we do a lot of work around gender equality, around gender roles, around disability as well. Obviously, I work in disability space, whereas he like my son is oblivious to him. Like, if someone from another culture is so oblivious to him, he's just another friend at school. And that's
my daughter was too. She didn't even notice. Like, it was so funny. NAIDOC week, like years and years and years ago, she was learning about, obviously First Nations culture in NAIDOC week in like year one or maybe pre-primary. And then she came home and was talking about it. And I was like, yes, but your cousins are First Nations. And she goes, I said, have you not noticed? And she goes, no, I didn't notice. And she didn't even, like, they were just her cousins, right? And that's the thing about teaching kids to see everyone equally.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think like what we've seen is just, we try so hard to, teach particularly young boys, around, not using aggression, no fighting, you can't hit people and all that. But I mean, their role play, their toys just feed so much. And, when my son was young, we spent so much time teaching these sort of values and beliefs in him. And the first day at school, he was like in a tussle with another kid, and it's so easy to be influenced when they're not with you and when they're with other peers, and you just got to keep reinforcing that. And sometimes what things like might seem small, how they're playing, what kind of characters they're trying to be when they're playing or role playing or in their costumes, you start to see those behaviors when
those 1%.
Absolutely.
I think also challenging thoughts, like challenging critical thinking, when your kids are young, or even when as they're developing, why, asking questions like, oh, why did you choose that? What were you thinking? Like, even if they, and challenging, their thoughts around certain topics, because it's really important that we be present and we help guide them into where I personally think it's really important. These are all really important because, as I was saying, it doesn't start at murder. You don't go from, there's all these little levels. And one of the things that really upsets me is how little people think that making sexist comments and jokes and sexual harassment, that, like in the schoolyard, sexualized jokes and sexualized stuff is just the beginning of gendered violence, and it progresses to violence.
That's it. And I think like a lot of people will dismiss like the ideas of of people who say blue's not just for boys and that sort of thing. And that is something we really, I won't say we pushed on our son, but we promote it in our house. My son will say the house color is rainbow, and we've got bright colors everywhere. I mean, I'm in a Be Kind shirt as we speak in rainbow colors, but it really made a huge difference as he's got older with just they have free dress day, he'll go in all sorts of rainbow colors. And even and this is a 6-year-old, and even he's got parents or friends at school he's in foundation, he's not even in year 1 yet, who already make comments that, oh, that's not a boy's color. Oh, why would you let your son dress like that? And then people have said that. Like, I've had people just give me a weird look, like, really, you're letting your son go to school like that? And
why?
and you
Why
can
are we
see
making why are we making this a thing? Like, why are
it's a
we
color.
associating with
Yeah,
something
and
with
that's
it?
it. And so you can see so easily when, I mean, obviously this is my job, this is my life,
Yeah.
and
And you
I'm gonna
firmly
see,
believe in it.
I'm gonna see things that other people wouldn't notice. But you can see kids aren't even year 1 yet, and they're already being promoted on what's acceptable to be a boy, what's acceptable to be a
Yeah.
girl.
And that's because at home, that's what's being promoted.
Yeah, exactly.
That
And you
doesn't
can
come from
see,
anywhere else. It comes
yeah,
from the house at
that's
that
it.
age.
Yeah. So that'd be my other advice. Just, really look into those things and how they're impacting your children from such a young age. And it's going to make such a huge difference as they develop into older adolescents, how they view, how they view women, how they view girls, how they view boys and men. Yeah, exactly.
One of the things that I said to my husband early on, I mean, obviously, having my daughter and then becoming a police officer and then having those blinkers blown way off, and then like really having a really good think about who I was as a parent, as a human, as an adult, etc. But one of the things I used to say to my husband all the time, especially when my daughter was at that really impressionable 10, 11-year-old age, is how you treat me is how she's going to expect her partner to treat her.
Yep.
So, and I used to say to him, be really mindful how you treat me. And it was a tough time. You've listened to a couple of podcasts, but we had a year separation when she was about 5 or 6. She doesn't even remember it because I protected her from the separation. And, she just thinks dad went to work and went away to work and, was gone for a year. And it wasn't until she was about 12, I said, yeah, we broke up for a year. And she's like, oh my goodness, I didn't even know. But yeah, so the thing is that, when we did get back together and I was saying, how you treat me, how you talk to me is how she'll expect her partner to talk to her and treat her. And that's the same whether you're whether you're male or female or, whatever gender, whatever person you are in the world. If all you see is your parents fighting, if all you see is, mum having to scream to be heard, which is my experience as a young person, as a child, saw my stepmom screaming to be heard by my dad. He ignored her. So therefore, early in my relationship with my husband, that's what I did, because that's how I got heard. I had to scream to be heard, and then, but if everything that you saw as a child and so, as an adult, as a parent, we need to have a bit of a think and go, is that how I want my children?
Yep.
Is that how I want my child to go through the world?
Yeah, absolutely. And we cannot ignore, they see everything. They see and notice everything. And people think they don't, but
They do.
They absolutely everything. They see who's cooking, they see who's cleaning, they see whose job is to take them to school or to swimming, or they see who spends time on their phone. They see, they notice everything. And like what sometimes we think is really small things that they're picking up, they become big things when they're
100%.
older.
And if I had my time over again, I mean, I was with my husband 12 years before I had my daughter, but we've been together since 15 and we got married at 19. And I think if I had my time over again, I would have taken more time to discuss these things before we got married, because it's quite funny. We laugh about it now, but my husband grew up with mostly, like, his parents both worked. So he saw that. His dad was a workaholic, but his grandparents brought him up most of the time. That he spent a lot of time with his grandparents. And back when his grandparents were young, or that the father went to work and the mother stayed at home, and she was the cook, the cleaner, the everything. She got an allowance every week, to go and buy food, and she got maybe $10 per week to buy herself something, so he controlled the money. She never had a license, like that's how his grandparents grew up, that old school. And when we got together and we got married, about a week after we got married, or after our honeymoon, he said, right, I expect dinner on the table at 6 o'clock when I get home. And I just looked at him and went, and it's a joke now, I just went, you married the wrong woman if you think that's going to happen. I said, cook dinner yourself. And it's quite funny because he became the family cook and he's the cleaner most of the time because he loves to do it. And I'm just sitting back going, well done, Kristi. But, you know, like there was this battle, and I think people don't think about these things. They don't talk about these things before they get in relationships. They don't talk about values and beliefs and stuff. So if I was, well, I've talked about it with my teenager, but if I was a parent of a young family, and I would be talking about this stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's important because it creates the foundations for their whole belief system of their life. Well, Shannon, this has been really interesting. Last thing that I wanted to bring up was, again, something that we talked about prior to pressing record. It was about sextortion and how it's seen as a predominantly male issue, young male issue in Australia and in the world, actually. Like we talk about, it's about 97% of young men are being targeted for their sextortion schemes. So what's your experience and what's your thoughts on that? Because you did say something and I was like, whoa, okay, I haven't really considered that. So
Sure.
Tell me about it.
Yeah, no worry. I would say that the stats there are very, very, very misleading. And you know, what we see, you know, I do quite a bit of work in research over the years, you know, and when the stats are so one-sided in one way, you sort of got to sit back and go, well, why is that? And why are we seeing those stats rather than just looking at the number? So, and I did make this comment after I listened to your previous podcast. So what I would say is that because mental health is severely overdiagnosed in young girls and severely underdiagnosed in young boys, I would say they'll look at the sextortion and say, well, the boy had no, you know, there's no other issues there. So this, you know, death by suicide in those cases has been a result of that sextortion. Whereas often when they're looking at the death by suicide for young girls, they will go straight to the mental health. They'll go, you know, well, did she have anxiety, depression? You know, did she have any psychiatric disorders? Rather than looking at, that sextortion, it often gets masked. And, you know, and also, you know, cyberbullying and all that sort of stuff that might be occurring on their social media that's not known, but it just sort of gets palmed under mental health for young girls. And we see it all the time. You know, I actually was on another podcast recently where I talked about coerced suicide and particularly in children and teenage girls, and severely underreported there in the child protection system, because when they see, you know, that death by suicide, whatever method and whatever they've done, and they automatically go to, you know, the mental health of them, whether they were seeing counseling, you know, depression, anxiety, whether that's, you know, bipolar and all that, rather than looking at, well, what was the cause of that mental health in the first place?
What's the contributing factors?
Yeah, so I'd say you know, obviously sextortion is gaining a lot of traction in the media, don't it? And there's people doing some amazing work there, but I'd say the amount of young girls that are being victim to these schemes and other cyberbullying and abuse online is severely underreported because there's too much stigma around the mental health of young girls.
Yeah, okay. So a few things popped up in my brain while you were talking. One of them was, I guess, with suicide for young people, we see a lot more young men suicide than young women. So when young teen girls suicide, it's seen as, I can see where the mental health direction is, whereas young men suicide a lot more, and so they're pinpointing one particular incident versus a history of incidents with young women. And the other thing that popped up for me when we talk sextortion, which is also considered child exploitation material, because for a long time, even when I was in the police, before, you know, the first lot of child exploitation I ever dealt with was maybe a year or two into the job, and I saw an 11-year-old, 12-year-old sending nudes, right? And that was seen back in, I don't know, 2012. Yeah, 2012. So we've seen girls, it's an expectation or a gendered thing, where expectation that girls send nudes to boys. It's, you know, girls being promiscuous, girls, you know, doing this, etc. Whereas we haven't seen as many, you know, the unsolicited dick pic or it doesn't get as much coverage. It's not seen as them doing the wrong thing. It's seen as them, you know, that's just boys being boys. There's some real, now that you brought it up and now that I'm thinking about it, there's some real gendered biases towards girls versus boys.
Yeah.
Would you say,
absolutely.
that?
Absolutely.
And that's not okay. Like, if we want to help young people, we need to take all gendered bias away and just go, first of all, if they're coerced, and there's a lot more coercion online these days, there's a lot more pressure online and there's a lot of beliefs where young people think that they have to, that everyone else is doing it, that, there's a lot of pressure online for young people, and that's not even being considered in their suicides and in their mental health is really a real big blind spot.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd say, and just add into that, I'd say the two themes that jump out to me in those, a lot of these cases are, how society teaches young girls of, this is how you need to dress, this is what you need to do to get the guy, or, to adhere to his demands and to his control. And for boys, it's really that, that gender role, saying, well, it's your choice to be in charge, or what kind of man are you if you're not having sex with her, that sort of thing. You don't even have nudes of her, just tell her what she needs to do. And that real idea of, that coercion and control, that role of power over women that young boys are being taught, that's really driving those sort of behaviors.
I have seen it go the other way once or twice, where a young, like a 12, 13-year-old boy came and saw me when I was at a school talking about, online safety. And he said, I'm being pressured by a 14-year-old girl to send her dick pics. And he was like, I don't know what to do. I like her, but at the same time, she's pressuring me and it makes me really uncomfortable. And, so if parents listening, and there's anything we can say about this, is that we need to be having these conversations with our kids way before we think they need to have them. We need to be talking about how, because they're behind a screen, that people say and do things that they wouldn't do to your face. There will be pressure to conform. There will be pressure to, do things that maybe aren't right. And, hence why we have to have these conversations, so that we can embolden them and give them the confidence to say no.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say boys and girls, and all of
our kids.
All children need to be learning about these concepts long before they even know what a phone is.
long before they even start. I mean, unfortunately, I make a joke with parent talks that, kids are coming out of the womb with an iPhone in their hand. So if we're giving them a device, we need to be having these conversations. If you think they're not ready for these conversations, then they don't need the device.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's basically it, isn't it? Well, thank you, Shannon. It's been really informative, and like, I haven't had anyone like yourself on the podcast yet. I mean, we've had lots of conversations about different, but we haven't really gotten into the nitty-gritty of what's going on, and the fact that it comes from you as well, like a male who's working in this, we see a lot of female advocates and a lot of females working in this space, and it's nice to hear from a male who's obviously got so much experience and an expert in this area. So,
my pleasure.
Thank you for listening to this podcast episode. Education empowers children and it empowers parents, and education prevents abuse. That is why I'm here, and that is why you are here. So thank you. If you want any further information or support, follow me on social media, either under Kristi McVie or Cape AU social media accounts. I'll put the links in the show notes. You can also purchase a signed copy of my book, Operation Kid Safe, via the website at www.cape-au.com. Also on my website is a free ebook titled 10 Tips to Keep Your Kids Safe from Abuse, and self-paced courses for parents to help you in your journey of child abuse prevention. Don't forget to join our free Facebook group called Operation Kid Safe Parenting Group. Please see the show notes for any extra information, links and help should you be looking for extra support. Thank you once again for giving a shit about preventing child sexual abuse. See you next time.